This is episode 88 of Changing the Face of Yoga. And I'm interviewing Sandra Gilbert, who has for many years been providing yoga to people with cancer. Let's listen.
Hello, and welcome to Change the Face of Yoga, teaching toddlers through golden oldies. I'm very excited to be talking to lots of yoga teachers who will explain their passion for teaching yoga to students with different ages, physical fitness levels, wellness levels, and different goals. They will explain the benefits of yoga for these students and will be including teacher tips and pose modifications. I am Stephanie Cunningham of Yoga Lightness, and I've been teaching over 50s for 10 years. So this area is my passion and the passion of many other yoga teachers that you will be listening to in this series. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get started. Hello, this is Stephanie Cunningham, and I have a great guest today. Her name is Sandra Gilbert, and Sandra is the director of YCAT, which is Yoga Therapy in Cancer and Chronic Illness Teacher Training. It was created by the late Johnny Chapman in 1997. Sandra has taught yoga in cancer in medical settings and at trainings and retreats for the last 15 years. She is currently teaching in yoga research and breast cancer at Vanderbilt University School of Nursing in Nashville, Tennessee, as well as training and mentoring teachers through the YCAT training program. Welcome, Sandra. And is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet you, Stephanie. Yeah, that's basically exactly where I'm at right now. I've been really privileged to be in this work, like you said, for the last 15 years in New York and now in Nashville. But yeah. Great.
I noticed that you said that you do these yoga therapy interventions, shall we call them, in all kinds of places, waiting rooms, chemotherapy, infusion suites, bedside, and also for their caregivers. So you're really working with people who are in the process of being diagnosed and being treated. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what most of my work in the past has been. And it's a lot of what we focus on in the teacher training as well. One of the things I like to really talk about is that yoga is available to people throughout the trajectory of being diagnosed, going through treatment, going through survivorship, and as necessary at end of life, along with the caregivers. And that's one of the beauties of offering yoga to people with cancer. And I would really love to see it being offered beginning at diagnosis so that somebody really could have that connection all the way through, but also in terms of prevention as well. Which is something we don't often talk about, but being talked about more.
Really? And how would yoga help with that, with prevention?
So I know for myself, it started out as stress management and just knowing the body of work around stress and how it affects our bodies, and in the connection of the hormone release and how we can take control over that through yoga and through mind-body practices, and in terms of just being aware and of our own selves so that we can then make lifestyle changes that are going to just promote more healthy lifestyle, more healthy living. Although, unfortunately, with cancer, that's not really a guarantee, but there's much more discussion about it, I think, than there has been in the past. And I know for myself, I come from a situation where there are a lot of family members with cancer, and that's how I got into yoga, was in terms of thinking about prevention. So,
yeah. You're also working in yoga research for cancer, I assume, for yoga and cancer.
Yes.
And I think that's really great. I'm just wondering, how did you manage to get in there and get, shall we say, the respect of the medical community for yoga?
You know, it's been a process. It started out where I actually began teaching yoga for the special child, to children with disabilities. And then I had worked with family members, or I had been the caregiver for family members with cancer. And then my mother got sick. And so I began practices of yoga with her in the hospital.
Oh.
And so that's how my interest got sparked. And then after she passed away, I found Yanni's training program and kind of came in. I hadn't taken my basic teacher training yet. So I kind of took a therapeutic yoga for cancer training, then took my basic, and then after a year started studying with Yanni. And it's really, I never left her side sort of until she passed away. And she was a nurse and I wasn't. So that question is really kind of profound because I think there are many of us that become yoga therapists and teachers who are not in the medical field. Mm-hmm. And I've been very blessed because I followed her around. I went to conferences with her. I began assisting her. I would sit in on research meetings with her at UCSF. I really educated myself and went back to college and got my BA. And though it's in anthropology and it's not in, healthcare, I just continue to build relationships, make connections. And one of the things that Yanni always taught me was to stand firmly in my expertise. And I've done that. And so through relationships with students that have come in and taken the training, that's how I ended up really getting into research with Dr. Stephanie Soul, who I met actually originally in the YCAT program. And she was a postdoc at Mount Sinai in New York. So, and we took Urban Zen training together. And through that connection, I ended up at Vanderbilt. And so it was really through building relationships. And it's a big part of what we emphasize in the training as well, is building a relationship.
And standing in your expertise. I like that. That's an
yes.
excellent thing. Yes. That we may not be, quote, medical professionals, but we do have our own area of expertise. I think that's great.
We also have to, in standing in our own expertise, we become part of the medical team. And so respecting what is being offered medically and not showing up and saying, oh, well, I know better because this is what yoga does. No, we're part of a team, and really respecting what medicine is offering to people with cancer and saying, we can walk alongside you and we can offer this alongside you.
Ah, very good. Excellent. So what kind of research are you involved in right now?
So the one research project I'm working on right now is for women with breast cancer with or without lymphedema. It's a small pilot study, and we're looking at a particular protocol. I'm not finished with the research yet, so I can't talk a lot about it, but it's some of the scales we're looking at are the psychosocial and emotional scales, also pain, to see how this particular protocol can affect women with breast cancer, those with lymphedema, looking at preventing it from getting worse and hopefully some benefit, and looking at those women who don't have lymphedema and looking at how the protocol affects them as well.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, that's
and we'll probably be finished with that in maybe June.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it sounds interesting. I'd love to hear how it turns out. I thought there was one thing you said that was very interesting, which was there is no consistent response to cancer, that everybody's journey is different. And I can certainly see where yoga would fit into that, but how do you see that?
So we meet people where they are, and so listening is very important when you're doing an evaluation with somebody, and also based on where they are in their relationship to their cancer, to their treatment, and really listening and hearing what they're saying on all the different levels of their being, and then being able to use that information and evaluate in what modalities you're going to offer. And it's not just, oh, I'm offering this practice, but it's a lot of education as well, and asking a lot of questions, and then offering a practice, and then getting feedback from the person you're working with. And if it's working for them, continuing along that way. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
No, I think it does.
But it all starts with therapeutic relationship and really listening to that other person. It's not what I know, my experience with yoga. I know what yoga says. how does that connect to who this person is and what I'm perceiving? So I oftentimes will ask somebody, I repeat things back to them, is this what you are saying? And it's a very important part of this work. It's the foundation of this work, is creating that relationship and listening to the other person.
And sometimes I've noticed that when you answer a question, you, the person that's answering, also gets some insight into how they're feeling or how they think that they didn't really know about before. So I imagine just that questioning, listening part also helps them clarify maybe how they're feeling or maybe what their life is like right then. So I can see where that would be really important, because I would think cancer is just a devastating intrusion into your normal life, and it would be hard to adjust, shall we say.
And so what the YCAT, classes starts with an awareness practice. It's based in John Kabat-Zinn's work with the body scan. It's not exactly the body scan. It's a little bit different because we're not invoking any kind of practices into it except to notice the physical body, the emotional body, the thinking, the mind. Notice the energetic level, and not the woo-woo energetic level, but your actual, are you fatigued or not? Noticing the breath. So that's how we start. So it's therapeutic relationship, and then it's this awareness practice so that the person can know what's going on with them, because I don't live in your body. And so it's very empowering to offer this skill to somebody that they can use anywhere, anytime, to check in with themselves and then be able to make choices about what might be helpful for them in that moment, or what can support them in that moment. And sometimes it's just maybe acknowledging something for the first time. If it was something difficult, maybe eventually they could accept it. For that moment, just noticing, being aware.
Okay. You also say that you help caregivers. So is it a very, very similar process for people who are caring for someone with cancer?
Yeah, it is. That's how I started out. Like I said, yoga was being a caregiver, and it's very much empowering you to take care of yourself in the midst of you caring for other people. And that's often very hard if it's your nature to be a caregiver. And I always say that yoga helped me to be a healthy codependent because I think we are codependent, as it should be, but codependency can become very unhealthy. And so how do I support somebody else? But, and then there's that, the idea of you put your oxygen mask on first. If you're on an airplane, that's the instruction. Put yours on first and then offer it to the person you're with or help the person you're with. And, and that's very important. And so educating caregivers about how important it is to take a break, or to some of the work that I did while I was with the Urban Zen program at Beth Israel in Manhattan. Oftentimes we included the caregivers in the practice at the bedside if they wanted to be involved. And if not, I would often take them to the waiting room and do a separate practice with them. But it's very much the same process, empowering someone to learn what they need for themselves and then do it.
I imagine it would be difficult to get that across to some people, that they did have to take time to do self-care, that it'd be so overwhelming, I think, to care for someone with cancer, and be very frightening.
Yes.
I would think that could be very hard with some people, just to say, no, you need to take this half day off or whatever,
Right. And so that's the beauty of reframing and getting to know somebody and creating that relationship with somebody, because it doesn't always mean going and getting a massage or going and getting your nails done or sitting in a bathtub. None of that worked for me when I was, and it still doesn't work for me. It can, but there's other options, and thinking outside of the box. And maybe it's just that you make sure you get up and take a bathroom break. Maybe it's just that you don't walk to the vending machine down the hallway in the hospital 10 times in one day. Maybe it's just that you do go downstairs and eat something healthy, or take a walk around the building, or just around the hallway. It can be very simple. Or maybe it's just that you're sitting in the chair next to the person and you're focusing on your breath, or you're counting to 10 as you focus on your breath. It doesn't have to be that you have to go anywhere. All of those things are wonderful and helpful. And in the long run, you need all of these things too. But like you say, keeping it simple and supporting someone in finding what is the simplest thing they can do so that they do feel empowered.
Yeah. Okay. You say that you teach from the YCAT curriculum and it's based in integral yoga. Could you kind of give us a little background into integral yoga so we know kind of where it's coming from?
Sure. So integral yoga was started in the 60s when Swami Satchidananda came to the United States. He was brought here by the artist Peter Max. And so in the 60s, he was doing lots of lectures in New York and started the Integral Yoga Institute in New York. And they later had an ashram in Connecticut and now have the ashram in Virginia that's called Satchidananda Ashram, Yogaville. He was at Woodstock. So that's some of the swamis that were on the stage are still around, which is really exciting as we celebrate. So the integral yoga includes kind of an awareness, asana, breathwork, yoga nidra, and meditation at the end. That's the curriculum for the class. So our curriculum is based on that. But it's also integral yoga that Dean Ornish based his heart disease reversal program on. He was an integral yogi and his teacher was Swami Satchidananda. So integral yoga has been a part of yoga research and lifestyle change for heart disease, for people with cancer, for other illnesses for a very long time. And actually, Nischala Joy Devi at one time was a integral yoga swami, and she has a huge body of work with heart disease and cancer. And she worked very closely with Dean Ornish and created his yoga program in research. Yanni also worked with Dean Ornish, and also Michael Lerner from the Commonweal Cancer Help Program in Bolinas, California. He was also a student of Swami Satchidananda. So there's a lot in medicine, health, and healing that has come from this tradition.
Sounds like it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But you said that Yanni was killed in a car accident, I believe.
Yes.
And that she was such an integral part of YCAT that you had to kind of step back and think about how you really wanted YCAT to go forward. And one of the things that you talked about was actually getting some more grief training in it. And I would think that in cancer or any kind of chronic illness, grief is often a big emotion for everyone. Have you found that that's true, that really you are dealing with grief among other kinds of emotions during this time for everyone?
So, grief is, it's interesting because, yes, it's true, everything you've said. And the last year she was killed on December 14th, 2017, just before 2018. So, it's been a lot of changes, and she was very much my spiritual mother. So besides being a friend and colleague and mentor. So that process was very different than it was when my mother passed away, when my father passed away, when so many family members passed away from cancer. So I feel like very much the YCAT curriculum also really helps with that, because again, it's beginning with awareness and looking at your own relationship with loss, and it's very individual. And what were your experiences with loss growing up? What have your experiences been with loss as an adult? But when it comes to a person with cancer, from the minute you're given that diagnosis, life is not the same. And so I have not ever had a cancer diagnosis. I have been through not even a biopsy for breast cancer, but through some of the process of the possibility that one might be necessary. So even just from that, I understand some of the emotions, but so a lot of what I'm speaking to is based on what students and colleagues with cancer have told me about their experiences. But just hearing that diagnosis, everything changes. So
you're grieving
life,
your old life as
right, you're
something else.
exactly. You recognize that there's life before cancer and life with a cancer diagnosis, and how a person relates to that is very individual. But I think it's an important part of what we need to talk about in terms of recovery and healing. And we're not talking about yoga as curing cancer, but yoga as healing and giving people the space to grieve their life as it was. And you often see that it can be very difficult for some people. And the other thing is some people are going to deal with it, and some people are going to go to these deep emotions, and other people are not. And so honoring that is also very important. It's not what I believe your process of grieving should be. Again, I'm just holding the space and giving the opportunity and offering education and offering support and offering tools for you to have that experience for yourself and move through it. And sometimes going to deep emotions and deep healing is not for everybody. And that's another really important part of this work, is really honoring the person where they are. As you create therapeutic relationship, you might be able to have discussions where you go deeper because you now have that relationship with a person. So you just have to be really in tune with that and know. And if you do step over the line and say something that's not appropriate, that you can say, you know what, I'm really sorry, made a mistake. So you can't also be afraid to have hard discussions with people either, but letting that person kind of lead you.
Okay. I can see where that could be quite difficult in some circumstances. Go ahead. I guess so. Just, we're almost at the end here. The thing I would like to ask is, where do you see YCAT or yoga for cancer types of interventions going in the future?
Before Yanni passed away, I was mainly involved with mentoring students from YCAT, and I wasn't going to too many conferences, really. I was working full-time and just working, at the teacher trainings and mentoring. So now that I'm taken over as director, getting more involved with the International Association of Yoga Therapists is really important. We're actually looking and discussing some guidelines that are specific to yoga therapy and working with people with cancer. So there's several teachers that will hopefully be starting some of those conversations. In terms of YCAT and teacher training, when this program started, there weren't a lot of yoga therapy programs. Now it's such a huge field. So I really see YCAT being more a part of continuing education, because we're not a 1,000-hour program. So, and also being a really big voice for mentorship. I think mentoring teachers is really important, especially when you're working in the field of cancer and oncology. Like we've discussed, so many different emotions, so many changes on every level, physical, emotional, on the thinking level, on the spiritual level, so many changes for a person. And often people come into this field because they really want to help and they really want to support. But until you've actually been in a hospital room with somebody that's very, very, very sick, you often, don't know which way you want to go in this field. Do you want to work inpatient? Do you want to work in hospice? Do you just want to do classes for survivors? And so supporting teachers in learning about themselves and what's going to allow them to offer their best service to the students they teach is really important. And also giving them support for their own self-care. We just did a self-care retreat with a group of teachers in Mexico, and it was fabulous. It's important to take care of yourself as a teacher. And so as much as we take care of other people, knowing that we need to show up modeling self-care as well. And So I really see the future of YCAT and yoga therapy in cancer in general, not just with YCAT, but I really want to be a bigger voice than just YCAT, because there are a lot of other programs out there. There are a lot of other teachers that are really exceptional. And I see collaboration, because what I always say is the need is so great. The number of people being diagnosed with cancer, even though people are living longer and are healing and there's a cure, but there's still so much that isn't that way. And the support is so needed. And not just so we talked about caregivers, are the healthcare providers as well, the nurses, their physicians. It's a very big world. And so that's what I really see is a lot more collaboration. Yes, looking more at standards of what is acceptable with yoga and cancer, and training teachers and supporting them.
Okay. Well, thank you. I want to give you Sandra's details. Her email is ycat.sandra@yahoo.com. The website is www.yogaforpeoplewithcancer.org. Facebook is YCAT, and Instagram is YCAT Yoga for Cancer. So if you are interested in the YCAT training for yoga teachers and yoga therapists to work with people with cancer, there you can contact Sandra to find out what it's all about. Sandra, I want to really thank you. I think you've done a really interesting podcast in looking at many of the aspects of yoga therapy and yoga in cancer treatment. And I think it sounds like you're doing wonderful work, and I congratulate you on that. And I really thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is, this training is so much my passion, and it was really a gift to work under Yanni, and those that have worked with her. We all miss her very much. And I don't know if it's okay to say this, but our next training is March 1st through the 10th at Yogaville in the United States, in Virginia. And we started a scholarship fund in her name so that we can support teachers in taking this training. And so there are small scholarships often available.
All right. So all of you that might be interested, that sounds like a great opportunity. And thank you, Sandra, for coming on.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's great to meet you.
Thank you for that wonderful interview. If you would like to be a guest on Changing the Face of Yoga, please go to my website, www.yogalightness.com.au, and under the Changing the Face of Yoga tab, you can complete Be Our Guest form. After reviewing the form and finding it applicable to this podcast, we will send you a link to schedule an interview. Please download, review, and tell your friends of any podcasts that are of interest to you and to them. If you would like to contact me, send an email to info@yogalightness.com.au. And thank you for listening to Changing the Face of Yoga.